Finally, let's turn to some current trends in U.S.-China relations and look beyond the present day toward where we are headed and the bilateral relations and how the populations of these nations view their respective governments. Now, interestingly here, a majority of Americans believe that the bilateral relationship is improving or remaining stable, though there has been a significant decline in the number of respondents holding that opinion in just 2 years, especially among the general public and opinion leaders. 1 in 4 respondents actually believes that the relationship has worsened. In contrast, Chinese respondents believe that there's been little change in this bilateral relationship. And if you take a look at the views of the respective governments, again, you'll see contrast. 70% of all Americans give the Chinese government a negative performance rating when it comes to handling this important bilateral relationship. However, the Chinese hold just the opposite view. They have a view where they are satisfied with their government's own performance in the bilateral relationship. And on both sides, clear majorities, on both sides, both in the United States and China, clear majorities believe that the American government deserves a negative rating, and Americans are more likely to rate their own government negatively in this context than the Chinese. So there is certainly a room for improvement here in the relationship as it is viewed by the public and how the governments are handling that. Now, this is set within the context of different attitudes about the nations as a whole. We wanted to ensure that we understood not just this bilateral relationship, but how the populations of these two countries understood themselves in this new millennium. And if you take a look at the current mood of the country, so that's in the United States, the mood of American respondents about America, and in China, the mood of Chinese respondents about China, there's a contrast in that Chinese people are overwhelmingly satisfied with their national conditions, and they believe that China is on the right track for the future. In contrast, here in the United States, there is widespread dissatisfaction about the United States. 3/5 of the general public, 2/3 of congressional staffers, and a solid majority of opinion and business leaders believe the United States is headed on the wrong track. And if you take a look then at aspirations that people have, in China, 5 times as many Chinese aspire to have increased wealth, while here in the United States, Americans are more interested in living as they like. So there's certainly a difference in the national culture and outlook in general towards not just the other country, but one's own country. As part of this, we wanted to take a look at the issues that respondents believed were most important within their domestic policy spheres. For Americans, the top issues remain the war in Iraq, the economy, healthcare, and immigration, while in China, corruption and Taiwan rank just below jobs and the economy, and the environment also ranks high. So there are contrasting lists of concerns for the publics in these two nations. Now, on the immigration issue, interestingly, Americans believe, a majority of them, that Chinese immigrants have a positive impact on American society in the long run. Now, on the Chinese side, for most of them, they believe that Americans in China have little effect on Chinese society. Americans believe that Chinese and Chinese Americans who come here enjoy equality of opportunity, while the Chinese feel that Americans in China enjoy superior treatment to the Chinese in China. Business leaders here in the United States are divided over whether the current United States visa policy has helped or hindered their effort to hire foreign-born professionals. Finally, expressing the greatest level of hope, which is what I believe we should all take from this survey, we looked at means to affect this relationship. How would we be best able to improve it? And it is clear that in both nations there is a lack of trust of the media, regrettably, but that travel and visitation and direct contact with peoples and the culture of the other nation are what is most effective in improving attitudes and bringing about positive change. So with that, we'll turn matters over to our moderator so that we can engage in dialogue about hope and fear as expressed by the Committee of 100's unprecedented mirror survey of public attitudes in the United States and China. Thank you.
Well, thank you to our four speakers. And we've heard from John and Victor about the Committee of 100 survey methodologies in both the United States and in China. And we've also heard from Chung and Frank about some of the findings of the survey. Now we'd like to hear from you and entertain questions that you may have regarding the Committee of 100 survey. Before we, as people are preparing their questions, let me go ahead and open up with a question that I have. We're going to have Secretary Paulson leading a delegation of cabinet officials to China this week on the Strategic Economic Dialogue. And the purpose of the Committee of 100 survey is to help educate and inform lawmakers and policymakers. And I was wondering if I could hear from the panel, what could Secretary Paulson and the U.S. delegation take from this survey that could assist them in their dialogue in Japan or in China?
Well, actually, I gave a report, the advanced copy, to the team who will be in China 2 or 3 days ago. And I think that our survey is very essential for this economic strategic dialogue. And on the one hand, we do see the tremendous, large number of American, samples, whether it's congressional staffs, staffers, or the business leaders, opinion leaders, and the general public, still believe that trade with China is a wonderful thing for the United States, for American consumers. That's a very important message, but also certainly support the globalist approach, the economic globalization approach rather than protectionist view. But at the same time, as Frank mentioned, that 2/3 of Americans surveyed really worry about the product safety, and also we talk about intellectual property rights, environment, all these kind of things. So these are the serious concerns. This is also the message Secretary Paulson can convey in Chinese. Unless we follow the international norms, then our trade will be jeopardized. So again, this is really all these points, whether negative or positive, really provide a foundation for further dialogue. This is from the U.S. side. Yeah.
I would add to that it's important for everyone who's interested in this bilateral relationship or in doing business to understand that the perceptions are very different. This survey shows that the exact same issues are perceived very differently on the two sides, that the general public, that business leaders, whether you look at issues such as outsourcing and its importance, whether you look at the environment, whether you look at the respective governments, that there is a sharp difference, whether positive or negative. And so everyone ought to bear that in mind, that these perspectives will very much influence decision making, and that the reporting of the media in general could stand much greater detail, and nothing is a substitute for direct contact and immersion within the culture. Getting there and looking at the facts on the ground and being involved is as important as our survey is. It also points to the need for that sort of direct, first-hand contact and experience.